No book in human history has generated the kind of anger and controversy which Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses, did during the 1980s. This book was perceived to be Islamophobic, and it was the argument of Muslims that it was demeaning of their holy prophet, that is Prophet Muhammad. Following the release of this book, the then supreme leader of Iran, and you can say the father of the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1977, Ruhollah Khomeini, Imam Khomeini, he came out with a decree of death calling for the assassination of Mr. Salman Rushdie for publishing such blasphemous material. Now, at the very outset, let me make it extremely clear that I do not approve of the decree of death which was handed out by Imam Khomeini to Salman Rushdie. First of all, I feel that this particular decree was Quranically incorrect. Imam Khomeini pointed out to a verse in Surah Tawbah, that is chapter 9, verse 61, stating that on the basis of this verse, we can say that the punishment for such kind of an offense is death. I have seen that verse, and I can tell you with confidence that the verse which Imam Khomeini quoted, it had nothing to do with blasphemy. Nowhere did it mention that the punishment for blasphemy is death. Some of the other fundamentalist scholars of Islam like Zakir Nayak, they point out to another verse in chapter number 5, stating that on the basis of this particular verse we can say that the punishment for blasphemy is death. Now what that verse talks about is basically, those who were waging war against the Muslims at the time of Prophet Muhammad, 4 kinds of punishments were prescribed for them, including death and banishment. Waging war does not mean demeaning by words. So how can you say that this applies to, offenses related to blasphemy? So first of all, let me make this point that the punishment for blasphemy is not mentioned in the Quran at all. This is primarily a part of Judeo-Christian tradition and is mentioned in the book of Leviticus. So Quranically, blasphemy has no significance at all. Now, my disregard for Imam Khomeini's fatwa does not mean my endorsement for Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses. I personally feel that the kind of filth which is present in, Salman Rushdie's book, it's so humongous and so very demeaning that he must have picked it up from nowhere except for the gutters of Bombay. Usually people feel that only the Muslims were ridiculed in that book. But for their kind information, I would like to tell them that Salman Rushdie has spared no one in his book, The Satanic Verses. The people who fight against racism, they should know that Salman Rushdie in his book has written nigger, a demeaning term for a black man. He eats white man's shit. He has also written of a famous, Islamic figure, Hazrat Bilal, that he was a black monster. So all the people who fight against racism, they should take Salman Rushdie to court and ask him as to how could he make such racist comments regarding somebody's skin color. The feminists and the anti-Semitic activists, they also need to take Salman Rushdie to court, because in his book he has written white women, never mind fat, Jewish or non-differential, white women, they were meant for effing, I hope you understand that, the 4-letter word starting with F plus ing, and for throwing over, that means use and throw. This is what was Salman Rushdie's ideas and intentions regarding white women, Jewish women, and and he called them, even women, if they're non-differential from one another, this is what they're meant for. Sleep with them for one night and then throw them out of your life. He has not even spared those who stood with him during those tough times. In his book he has written that there is no difference that there is no difference between writers and whores. He is called the British sister effing, and the Americans effing. Right. On the first page of the book itself, Rushdie calls Londoners bastards. The four-letter word, starting with the alphabet F plus ing, effing, that has been used 52 times in Rushdie's book. The word bastard has been used 29 times. The LGBT community needs to know that even the transgender community has been ridiculed in Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses. He calls hinjadas, transgenders, chutiyas shits. Chutiyas is a derogatory Hindi term which basically means a fool, and shits we all know. So he calls them hinjadas, chutiyas, shits, meaning thereby transgenders are fools and they're shitty people. This is what this is the kind of opinion which this man has. In my country, India, 96 crore people profess the faith of Hinduism, and one of their most famous gods, or rather their most famous god, is Lord Ram. And in his book, Rushdie calls Lord Ram drunken and lecherous. Lecherous is somebody who has a large sexual appetite. He wants to sleep with girls one after the other. And he calls his wife Sita flighty. Flighty basically refers to a lady who's very easy to fool. You talk to her for some time and then she's willing to come with you and to sleep with you. So when you bring forth these points, a lot of people say that don't judge the book like this. It's it's a book, it's a literary book, it's a book of English literature, it's a masterpiece. So basically, I don't know how can people call this a masterpiece of English literature, because this supposed masterpiece of English literature, it contains more than 100 Hindi slang words. On the first page itself, Salman Rushdie has used 16 Hindi slang words. It'll be very interesting for you to hear that at that point in time when this book was out in the market and creating all the news, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of Britain. And Salman Rushdie, he calls her Maggie the bitch in his book. And he also uses the term effing bitch for Margaret Thatcher. He does not even spare the Queen of England. He in his book he writes of, he dreams of having sex with the Queen of England. So this is the filth which you will find inside Salman Rushdie's book. And that is why I say, the Salman Rushdie's book, Satanic Verses, it has satanic teachings. But at the end of the day, I would like to state that if you have a problem with any literary material, any book, any writer, then choose the right way. Go to a court of law and get that book censured or banned. This is the right way to go about it. Freedom of speech and expression is not an absolute right. No right on the face of the earth is an absolute right. It is subject to reasonable restrictions. Freedom of speech and expression does not mean that I can abuse anybody, I can tell falsehood, I can endanger the state, I can cause public disorder, I can cause enmity between communities. I cannot do all of these things. In the Indian Constitution, in Article 19, you have been granted the freedom of expression, but if you go into the subsections, then certain restrictions in the freedom of speech have also been laid down. In the land of the free, home of the brave, United States, you can go back to the judgment of Justice Oliver Holmes Jr., in which he used the phrase shouting fire in a crowded theater, which basically meant that you cannot shout, falsely proclaim that there is fire in a theater when there is no fire. So freedom of speech has certain restrictions. We need to honor those restrictions. At the end of it, Imam Khomeini's fatwa did not help the Muslim community because it was something which was uncalled for. Imam Khomeini, I personally feel that he was a radical Islamist preacher, because firstly he was responsible for the execution of political prisoners. People say 30,000 political prisoners in Iran, they were executed by him. Secondly, he was supportive of the Iran hostage crisis, which lasted for 444 days, in which 52 American diplomats, they were held hostage by Iranian miscreants. He also went to war with Iraq, and there were other numerous controversial things which he did. I would not like to enumerate upon them. So the point which I am making over here is that even though Salman Rushdie's book was full of dunk, trap, and outrageous pronouncements, but still we cannot justify the decree which was handed out by Imam Khomeini. Also, I would like my viewers to know that what did Salman Rushdie say about the Muslims which angered them so much, apart from the fact that he called Hazrat Bilal a black monster. He also called Prophet Abraham, who was considered to be, to be sacred by the Christians and Jews as well. He called him a bastard, and intentionally he named the prostitutes, the women playing the role of prostitutes in his book, after the names of the wives of Prophet Muhammad. The wives of Prophet Muhammad are referred to as the mothers of the believers, the mothers of the believers. They are the mothers of the Muslims. So by giving their names to prostitutes, Rushdie sent out the signal that all Muslims, they are sons of whores. So these kind of statements are bound to generate controversy and anger and turmoil. But these things have to be restricted, because I don't understand why don't Muslims get angry when Sufi shrines are bombarded, or Shia processions are bombarded, or when mosques are demolished, or extremely important mosques related with Islamic history in a very intense manner, they are destroyed by the government in Saudi Arabia. When you hear plans of destroying the Prophet's tomb in Medina, the Muslims do not react in a very outrageous manner, but they react very sharply when you have a stupid book like the Satanic verses, or a stupid movie like The Innocence of Muslims. So at the end of the day, it is your response to problems which decides how you will tackle the problem. Yes, blasphemy is a concern, but we need strict laws, not street laws, to deal with it, and you will not gain anything by assassinating any person, and that is absolutely wrong and illegal. So do not ever think of doing it.